Today's webinar. It's co-organized by UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities and the Pascal International Observatory Learning Cities Network. We continue to successfully build on the collaborations that emerged from the 4th International Conference on Learning Cities, which was held in Medellin in Colombia in October of last year. So the current webinar series focuses on learning cities and their post-COVID-19 recovery, and we're hoping to particularly address challenging aspects of learning city development in the recent context, as well as sharing successful approaches of our learning cities by offering this space as a space for global dialogue. So today we will be discussing the challenges of planning, measuring, and evaluating learning in learning cities, particularly when we're trying to capture less formal types of learning that may occur in neighborhoods and communities. So what I'm going to do today will be, I'm your moderator, first of all, so I'll briefly introduce myself. I'll go through the housekeeping details of today, and then I'll outline the speakers we have coming up and hand over to Raul from UNESCO UIL for a warm welcome. So unless somebody stops me, I'm going full steam ahead here, if that's all right. So I'm Professor Catherine Lido. I'm from the Urban Big Data Center at the University of Glasgow, and I am Deputy Director for the Pascal International Observatory for Europe. I will be your moderator today, but a little bit to my background. I'm a social psychologist, and I've got a keen interest in using novel forms of data to try and capture adult learning in learning cities. So you may have read some of my work. I was in the Psychologist magazine last year with an article entitled Big Data in the Big City. And we've had some work published in the Oxford Review of Education on how to capture life-wide learning. So you can go ahead and follow me on Twitter if you want, at Catherine Lido. And I'm really honored to be asked to moderate today because I feel like the work we started at Urban Big Data Center launched some really novel and different approaches to how learning cities can better operationalize and capture new forms of learning. You can go ahead and head over to their website, ubdc.ac.uk, if you want to learn more about our approaches. But today I'm really looking forward to hearing about other city approaches, because it was our vision when we co-developed this webinar series that this would be a space for city stakeholders, urban and educational planners, academics and educators to come together to share knowledge and exchange ideas about how we can use the current COVID crisis to be more creative and flexible in reshaping learning city planning, but also learning city evaluation. So for housekeeping, today will be an hour and a half for the full webinar. This webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on the UIL YouTube channel. A link will be shared to this in the general chat box. So we'll have individual presentations taking no more than 10 minutes. I will offer a 1-minute warning so that everybody adheres to their timings. And if you're interested in hearing more, you can always sign up to the UIL newsletter, and that link will also be provided in the chat box. So note that you, the audience, are muted. So for the final time, to pose a question to one of the speakers, and it would be really great if it came during or after their talks, please post that question in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen and not the chat box. It'll get lost. Likewise, if you want to introduce yourself, your organization, and where you're from, and engage with other people and network, please do use the chat box and not the Q&A. But you need to select the option that says all panelists and all participants. So I think that's all the housekeeping I have. I'll just briefly say that we're welcoming expert presentations from around the world this afternoon. First, from the International Institute of Educational Planning in Paris, where we have presentations by Candy Luga, Research Coordinator, and Chloe Chimier, Research Associate, both from IIEP. This will be followed by presentations from the city of Goyang Municipality in the Republic of Korea, a UNESCO GNLC member, a presentation by Mr. Hoseok Kim, Expert Advisor of their Lifelong Education Department. We'll then move on to the city of Huye in Rwanda, represented by their mayor, Mr. Sebutege Ange, accompanied by Dr. Pierre Clavet from the University of Rwanda and the Center for Sustainable Healthy Learning Cities and Neighborhoods. And finally, we'll have a presentation from the city of Huejotzingo in Mexico which is another UNESCO GNLC member, represented by their mayor, and Helica Alvarado Juarez, and that will be translated for you. So we'll finally open up for Q&A with closing remarks from Professor Mike Osborn. We are running slightly behind time, so to learn more about the work that Mike does as Research Director in the School of Education and University of Glasgow, but also Pascal, go ahead and visit the Pascal International Observatory webpage as well, because we really believe that these discussions are urgently needed right now to avoid the widening of educational and digital inequalities. And learning city frameworks and indicators and networks are really vital for delivering lifelong education for all, but also for evaluating it. So without further ado, I hopefully will be turning over now to Raul to give a warm welcome from UNESCO UIL.
Hello, can you see me?
Hello.
Hello. This is Christina Drew speaking from UIL, the Institute for Lifelong Learning from Unesco, based in Hamburg. And I would like to greet all the participants and thank you for the interest shown for this important topic. I'm here talking on behalf of Mr. Raúl Valdés Cotera. I hope he will be able to join still further the Institute. And maybe let me briefly say that the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities comprises of over 170 cities. And this topic of educational planning, monitoring and evaluation was considered very important to the cities. So it's among 7 clusters, 7 thematic work groups that the whole network is working on. And we have 2 coordinating cities doing this. So that's one city in the Republic of Korea, who will speak today as well, and another city in Mexico, Huejotzingo. And I'm not sure if the mayor of Huejotzingo, who has kindly accepted to present, is actually among the participants today. So we're still dealing with that. But maybe we can start with our sister institute in Paris, the Institute for Educational Planning, and I'm really looking forward to their presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You will now have 10 minutes, IAEP.
Yes, hello. Actually, I was agreed 15 minutes, so but it seems that I cannot start the video, so I don't know if the organizers can allow me to put in the video and also display my my presentation, or I can do that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm trying to open
thank
it.
you.
Just be with me. You see it?
Yeah, and so I have control on the presentation.
There you go.
Okay. I'm just trying to have.
Maybe if you just say next when you want to have the next slide.
Oh, okay. I requested. Okay. Okay, so hello, my name is Candy Lugaz. So I am a research coordinator at the UNESCO International Institute for Educational Planning. So firstly, I would like to thank the organizers for the given opportunity to present the research conducted by IAEP on educational planning in cities. So during this presentation, I will present very briefly our institute, the IAEP, and I will then give you some key insights about the educational planning cycle. Then I will present the main characteristics of IAEP's research on cities, and I will share with you a few preliminary findings from France, where we piloted the research. Next slide. So IIEP, so we can count today 7 UNESCO education institutes and 1 center that support UNESCO's program in education. So you already know well UIL, the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, and I'm glad to present you today the IIEP. So IIEP was founded 57 years ago with the key mandate to strengthen the capacity of UNESCO member states to plan and manage their education systems. So we fulfill this mission working with a wide range of partners, ranging from national ministries of education and their offices at central, regional, district levels, but also with cities, with international and regional partners, and with the research community. And our headquarters are based in Paris, but we have also 2 offices in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Dakar, Senegal, for a more regional focus. So we work, next slide please. We work with the member states to produce new knowledge and to share this knowledge for informed decisions for, no, the slide before, for policy making, and we provide training and technical cooperation in relation to educational planning and management. And actually we do that through 3 main areas of activities, namely research, training, and technical cooperation, and these are activities are interlinked. Next slide, please. So educational planning is intrinsically linked to the policy formulation process. So very briefly, I will present you the 5 central steps of this cycle. So firstly, the education sector diagnosis, through which you make an assessment of your education systems based on a set of selected indicators and using projections and simulations. Based on this starts the plan preparation process for a given period, usually a multi-year period, and with the identification of strategic objectives, key indicators, action plans, and cost and financing issues. This technical process then leads to the framing of a product, the policy document. And the policy is then implemented and monitored to assess the successful activities, the main failures of the plan, and the challenges to overcome. And consultation with education stakeholders is essential all throughout this process to ensure the relevance of the policy, but also its ownership. So let me now discuss in more details. Next slide, please. IEP's research program on cities. So this research builds on IEP's research expertise on decentralization of education. Indeed, considering the growing role that cities play in achieving the SDGs, we developed this research program to precisely have a better understanding on how cities plan for achieving SDG 4, and as part of a novel integrated plan for the sustainable development of the city. Actually, there's a dearth of literature and of awareness on that topic, really a research gap, while cities do play a crucial role in this regard. So the objective of the research are to deepen the knowledge on this, to highlight the main challenges faced by cities in planning for education, to learn from successful and innovative experiences, and also to stimulate knowledge and strategic thinking among cities. Next slide. So by city, in this research, we mean a local elected authority, a local territory with self-governance and with responsibilities in education as per the decentralization framework. So through this research, we analyze how cities design, implement and monitor their education strategies. And we use here this terminology strategy to cover different terminologies used by cities, like education plans, education projects, policy or documents. So during the research, we really study the planning cycle with specific attention given to the actors involved within and outside the city hall. We pay attention to the tools used, to the processes, to the content of the education strategy and the thematic priorities, and overall to the strengths and the challenges faced by the cities in this process. And so we pay also particular attention to the collaboration by the city hall with the local education community, namely the school staff, district education offices, parents, pupils, civil society organization, or even private companies that work with education with the city. And we pay also attention to the collaboration between the education sector with other sectors at city level, like health, culture, sports, or urbanism, to see how far the education strategy has been co-designed and is integrated in the overall city's development plan. Next slide. So we launched the qualitative field research last year with a pilot phase in France. And at the same time, we launched also an international quantitative survey in collaboration with UIL and the Learning Cities Cluster on Educational Planning and Management. We are now preparing the international phase of this research, field research. And actually, we would be very happy to discuss with any city or partner who would be interested in joining us in this research program. So based on the research, we will prepare city case studies and research briefs and other kinds of dissemination tools. We will update our training programs, and we will also discuss with the cities potential areas of technical cooperation based on the research findings. Next slide. So we launched a pilot phase of the research in France. No, the slide before, please. In France last year, covering 4 cities. So we identified France, considering its interesting decentralization framework in education and the increased responsibilities shared with the cities in education these past years. We selected 4 cities of different size, small to medium, from different regions and with different socio-economic context and education issues. And all of them had developed significant education strategies. And 3 cities among them expressed directly their interest to join in the research, because actually they really considered the research as an opportunity to take a step back in a quite moving context and subject to quick changes. Next slide. So the field research is mostly qualitative. Considering the lack of data on that topic, the aim is really to learn from the field level actors who design, who implement, and who monitor the education strategy of the city. So we conducted a series of individual and focus group discussions with the wide range of actors, namely the city education elected officials, but also the education department staff of the city hall, but also school supervisors, principals, teaching and non-teaching staff, pupils, parents, and representatives of civil society organizations or private companies that work in education with the city hall. We completed this analysis with an analysis of key documents like the budgets of the city for education. And based on this, we drafted city case studies. They constitute actually a kind of diagnosis of the city's education strategies, which highlight the strengths and the challenges, but also suggestions for policy improvement. And then we will discuss the research findings with each city authority, and we'll examine with them the way forward. Next slide. So I would like to take now a few minutes to share with you a few preliminary findings of this pilot research. So firstly, one of the hypotheses of the research, which was confirmed so far by the pilot phase, refers to the importance of co-designing the city's education strategy. This is quite essential, this co-designing process, to ensure the ownership of the education strategy by the local education community, but overall its overall relevance and efficiency. So this means developing consultation mechanisms at all stages of the planning cycle, and in particular during the design and the monitoring and evaluation phase. However, the research in France highlighted that field level actors like the education staff, parents, or even pupils are most of the time forgotten in this process. They are informed, but they are not involved. And while it could be opposed that consultation takes time and is complex, which is true, The benefits are, however, bigger than these constraints. So it's quite important to develop efficient consultation mechanism. Next slide. A second key finding refers to the concept of integrated planning. So you know that the SDGs require integrated planning to move from a sectoral to an intersectoral approach of development. But however, among the 4 cities studied, we noticed that actually education is seldom a pillar of the city's overall development plan. There are links between education and the other sectors like health, culture, or sports, or urbanism, but the relationships remain quite marginal, and usually they do not refer to a kind of common and shared vision. But however, we could notice timid efforts in this direction, which allow us to identify a few key conditions for the development of integrated planning for SDG 4 at city level. So firstly, the importance to develop a shared and integrated vision. We can refer here to the example of the city of Grigny in the suburb of Paris, where actually education is at the heart of the city development plan. And based on this experience, the French government developed the label of educational cities, Cité éducative in French, to promote this intersectoral, co-designed and integrated approach for the development of the city based on education issues.
Candy, you have 1 more minute. Sorry, this is fascinating, but if you could move to the conclusions, that would be great.
I'm sorry, but I prepared a 15 minutes presentation, so I think I had still time.
No, we started 5 minutes late, but you've still had the 15 minutes.
Okay, okay. Bon, so another condition is the existence of formalized partnerships and institutionalized partnerships to allow dialogue between sectors and actors. And all of this has an impact on the human resource management by the city, and that implies to change the recruitment profiles for people with more technical and versatile skills. Next slide. Another finding is overall the weakness of the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms developed by cities to assess their education strategies. Overall, there's kind of lack of tools and indicators and resource persons to properly evaluate their education strategies, and also the difficulty to animate really steering committees over the long term, which would be useful indeed for the overall efficiency of the strategy. So, okay, so this is the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. I thank you for your attention. Of course, I would be very happy to answer your questions and comments, and also really feel free to contact us should you be willing to join in the research. We would be very happy to learn from your city experiences. Thank you.
That was absolutely wonderful. And yes, of course, we'll have plenty of time for discussion at the end. So sorry to be such a harsh taskmaster. It was really interesting. And if you've got questions, please pose them in the Q&A box, because Candy and the team will be here to answer questions you might have about that policy cycle or further about the findings or implications. But now I believe we're moving on to the city of Goyang from the Republic of Korea, who will be presenting their work. Hello, you're welcome. We can hear you. Hello.
Excuse me, this is the interpreter from the Goyang city. The presenter is not allowed to use video, so please give the authority to start video.
Okay. Many thanks. are you just waiting for permission to share the video? Or
yes, the name is Ho-seok Kim, H-O-S-C-O-K-K-I-M.
There should be no problem turning on the camera. All the rights are granted to your name, Ho-seok Kim.
Well, it doesn't work, but I think as long as you can all see the presentation, I can start.
wonderful, we can see the presentation. That would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Can you make this PowerPoint full screen? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So let me start. Good evening, I'm Ho-seok Kim, the education specialist at the Goyang City Government. I'd like to extend my gratitude to UNESCO, GNLC, and Pascal for organizing this meaningful webinar. I am delighted that I can join a distinguished panel of lifelong education experts of the world and share the case of Goyang. And I was deeply impressed by the presentations of Ms. Candy. So I thank you very much. And I hope the IIEP can continue to work with GNLC members. Next slide, please. Today I'll talk about Goyang's example of education planning, monitoring, and evaluation system based on civic participation. Goyang is a city in the northern part of Korea with 1.07 million citizen learners, 341 official education institutions, including preschools, primary and secondary schools, and universities, and 447 lifelong learning institutions. We have about 136,000 students in the primary and secondary schools. In Korea, the central government has the authority in planning, evaluation, and operation of official curriculum in schools. Cities only provide operational support. Therefore, I will focus on lifelong education for citizens aged 18 or above in my presentation. Next slide, please. COVID-19 poses many challenges on education. I believe one of the biggest challenges is in the relationship between learners and teachers and between learners themselves. Above all, creating a relationship is one of the most important learning activities. Therefore, Goyang's education planning focuses on how we stay in contact and create relationships rather than on what to learn and teach. With this approach, Goyang established the Lifelong Learning Promotion Plan 2020-2024. Let me give you some background and progress of it. Next slide, please. First, we identified the need to raise awareness on the value of lifelong learning, with changes in our times, changes in policies home and abroad, and the characteristics and context of Goyang. Next slide, please. In a lifelong learning city, previous slide, please. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. In a lifelong learning city, citizens are subjects of learning, not consumers of education. That's why we gathered citizens, stakeholders, and experts to co-create the education plan. I think this was also stressed by the presenter of the IIEP. We encouraged citizens to own the process by organizing relay forum on lifelong learning, citizens workshop, co-creation team workshop, and so on. The process made progress in terms of quality and depth between 2016 and 2019. Next slide, please. In particular, the Relay Forum on Lifelong Learning between 2016 and 2019 was a space for citizens to have a diagnosis of the city and formulate suggestions and alternatives. In the 3-year-long discussion forum, we came up with the 10 policy keywords for lifelong learning cities. Next slide, please. And in 2018, we conducted the lifelong learning survey in Goyang. And we took a look at the participation of lifelong learning programs in 3 aspects of lifelong, life-wide, and life-deep, and also check the current status of the grassroots learning on the field. Next slide, please. In 2019, 100 Goyang citizens came together to have a workshop on lifelong learning planning. We named it as 사부작 workshop according to the level and formal participation of citizens. Now, 사부작 in Korean means slow and steady. It symbolizes our hope to create a sustainable lifelong learning city. Next slide, please. And experts in co-creation team also worked together to conduct in-depth interview of citizens of Goyang and came up with the citizen learning keywords such as proactive democratic citizen, lifelong growth, creating relationships and connecting hearts, and the power of retrospection. Next slide, please. In this process, the lifelong learning plan of Goyang City experienced a shift from, for the older generation, institution-led and one-off programs toward, for everyone, learning in everyday life and lifelong growth. Next slide, please. We also conducted persona analysis in order to enhance the effectiveness that is felt by citizens when it comes to lifelong learning policies. In this analysis, we consider the age group and level of participation. Next slide, please. In this persona analysis, we created a map of lifelong learning of citizens of Goyang with 3 aspects: contact and search, and learning and experience, and growth and sharing. And based on this, we came up with a policy approach for different personas. Next slide, please. The next slide, please.
You are now entering your final minute, if that's okay.
마지막 1분 남았습니다.
Sorry about the timing, but 1-minute warning.
So in this process, we came up with the vision of Goyang, a perfect cities to learn together, and established the vision system with 3 core values: accessibility, diversity, and sustainability. And we also came up with the strategies and challenges so that we can establish a structure of the education programs. So based on the active participation of citizens, we established the lifelong learning promotion plan 2020-2024, which was published in January this year. This is placed in a major part of the overall urban development plan. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Goyang is a coordinator city for education planning and monitoring evaluation in the GNLC and is implementing a pilot project on lifelong learning city performance management system. It is a system that enables the monitoring and evaluation of the growth and change of lifelong learning cities. And
that
we
is
have
your,
developed
that's your 10 minutes, Mr. Kim. Do you want to just have some final concluding thoughts? That's 10 minutes up.
All right. Let me be quick. So there are 3 steps of developing the indicators. And based on these indicators, we are going to conduct a survey of 2,000 citizens in September this year. We're also going to conduct survey research on current status of lifelong learning facilities to establish a database. Next slide, please. And based on the workshop of experts and citizens, we came up with 6 lifelong learning city models. And we will continue to improve the systematic aspects of these models. Next slide, please. And last slide.
Oh, is that the last slide? Is that the final slide?
Yes.
Yes, great, because we have to move to our next city in Rwanda. So final thought?
With all this process, we're going to have a time series analysis, detect the change and growth of cities, and incorporate the findings in our policies.
That,
and
I think,
all this process will be shared with citizens and all stakeholders.
I think that's a great place to stop. I think your models look fantastic, and I'm sure there's going to be loads of questions about all this exciting work that you have coming up. So thank you, Mr. Hwaseok Kim from Goyang Municipality in the Republic of Korea. That was a wonderful presentation. Also some interesting and innovative approaches to policy planning evaluation. And now we're very pleased to be joined by our speakers from Huye city in Rwanda. So if I'm allowed and they're able to start sharing their screen, we have the city represented by their mayor, Mr. Sebuteje Ange, as well as Dr. Pierre Clavet from the University of Rwanda and the Center for Sustainable Healthy Learning Cities and Neighborhoods. They will also have a very tight 10 minutes. I feel like the meanest person in the world today because these are fascinating and complex issues, but we're now 10 minutes behind time. So if we could try to keep to time for our Rwandan speakers. Can we hand over to them now, team? And again, pose your questions in the Q&A box. Oh, hello, welcome, Mayor. Welcome,
Yes,
welcome.
good afternoon.
You may speak.
Hello, do you get me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you. You may proceed.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm very sorry to join late. It's today I'm very honored to be part of the discussion of this important topic, discussing the planning, benchmarking, and monitoring and learning cities. By name, I'm Andre Sebutege. I'm the mayor of Huye district, which is one of the 8 districts of the Southern Province. In Rwanda, we have a total 30 districts. Next slide, please. With the total population, next slide, please. Next. With a total population of 328, if you can see, we have many public and private schools. We have 5 higher learning institutions and 10 vocational education schools, which makes this city a hub of education and culture in Rwanda, because we host the largest campus in the country, and we have many more public schools compared to other districts in Rwanda, which makes the district as an education and culture hub, as I mentioned. You can see it's not far from the capital city. It's 2 hours drive, 124 kilometers. If I can tell the participants about the history, it was known as the former capital city of Rwanda, Burundi, before during the colonization, which makes also a city of history. Next slide, please. Huye city is among the 6 secondary cities in Rwanda, which is a new concept in Rwanda with the main purpose to achieve urbanization and economic development to supplement the capital city of Kigali, the capital city of Rwanda, which is Kigali, and which makes us our city as an engine of the country for the human capacity development. And in the process, Huye city, because of its uniqueness, we have given a brand to become a hub of education in the country. And this, in the process, we have entered all the planning process of the local economic development strategy and the district strategy, which is now developed. It's now a 6-year program. And the local economic development strategy is a strategy which was developed for the district, mainly considering the uniqueness potentialities of our city. The next slide, please. The next slide talks about the district potentialities. I will not talk more about this slide. Maybe the point to highlight is this education and research and culture facilities we found in the city. And on the position I mentioned on the first slide, which makes us also a strategic position because we are not far from the capital city of Burundi, which is a neighbor country, and also a city of Bukavu, which is our neighbor country, the DRC, which makes us many students coming to learn to this city. Normally during the education period, we counted 70,000 students, specifically more than 20 students running from University of Rwanda, and the 4 other private universities. Next slide. This is the planning framework, but I will talk on the institutional framework, which is not highlighted here. Normally we have the Ministry of Education, which is responsible of developing the education policy. Then we have the Rwanda Education Board, which is mandated to develop the curriculum, and then the districts or the city comes to the implementation and monitoring level. And for the higher learning institution, we have the Higher Education Council, normally, which is a regulatory agency for the higher learning institution, and a specific attention for the vocation and training education. We have the Rwanda Polytechnic. As you can see on the down to the slide, on the annual target and the annual budget, they are decentralized to the district level, which is responsible of the implementation of all the policies related to education and the implementation, as well as the monitoring and evaluation. Next slide, please. This is the strategic interventions based on the strategic vision for the city to develop the city as a sustainable education and culture hub. We are targeting these days on the construction and the rehabilitation of the education and research facilities, because some of the facilities we have, they are older, because as I mentioned, it's where formal education started in Rwanda. We are planning to establish an integrated cultural development center, and we are promoting the ICT in the education with the concept of smart classroom in primary and secondary, at secondary level. And we are monitoring the implementation of competence-based curriculum, because the priority of the country now is the quality of education. Next slide, please. On the monitoring and implementation framework, as I mentioned, the other institution framework that we collaborate, normally they are responsible for policy development, curriculum development, but when it comes to implementation and monitoring, it's the districts. Here I mentioned that we do it in 2 ways. There are a self-evaluation that is being done by the districts, our own staff and the teams. We have what we call quality assurance teams, normally which conducts the self-evaluation here mentioned, and the central government evaluation, which is done normally twice a year. And as we speak now, one is being conducted by the National Institute of Statistics, evaluating the district performance contract, which is being done on an annual basis. And we have the monitoring and evaluation also mechanism set by the district council, which is normally above the district executive committee. We have the district council. Also, they have commissions which also conduct audit and evaluation of the priorities of the district. And for Huye city, education also is a top priority. And also we have what we call peer learning and peer review sessions, where we peer institution or education institutions to learn from each other, to share best practices, to share challenges, so they can learn from one another. This in brief, the background of the city. With 5 minutes, I think this is what I can tell. But we know we are entering the Q&A session. I'll be here happy to highlight more where I fell short in the presentation. And thank you very much for the opportunity, and for the organizers and my colleague Clever. I hope he is connected also to continue the presentation. Thank you very much, and my apology again to join late the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Angers. Pierre, as you know, you don't have very many minutes, but welcome. We'd love to hear the rest of the Rwandan presentation from the city of Huye.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm happy to be here as well, even if I joined late. So that is why I have to use my colleague's computer, who is connected since an hour or more ago. So I'm happy as well to be among the team supporting the Kigali and Huye cities in being accepted as members of the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities. The Center for Sustainable, Healthy Learning Cities is a large-scale 5-year project funded by the UK Research and Innovation under the Global Challenges Research Fund. If you need more detail on this, kindly go to my first slide. I'm still expecting to see my first slide. So can I continue maybe in the meantime?
Yes, but please just for a couple minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Now, Rwanda, for centuries, have been suitable for agriculture. So we are really developing a lot. People are almost 1 out of 4 people is involved in agriculture. But after the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994, the government has embraced urbanization as a possible resource to unlock the transformative economic opportunities for its national development. So this, after starting this, the urbanization really went very fast. So going from, for example, 4.6% before the genocide, and now reaching 16% in 2012, and the expected level to be reached is 35% in 2024. So this comes with a lot of challenges in managing the urbanization in Rwanda. We have a lot of waves of urbanization. So we had, after the genocide, returning refugees. We have tried to manage those by creating what is called imidugudu as group settlement. But there is also now this internal migration, which is really going rapidly, especially rural to urban migration. So what SHLC Rwanda is doing, or is really trying to research on, is to strengthen the capacity of Kigali and Huye cities to address urban health and education challenges in neighborhoods. That is how we came to choose the Kigali, which is well known by everyone who has information about Rwanda, but also Huye, which is known as a learning city, as the mayor explained it. We have a multidisciplinary team which is working on research in those two cities. From the University of Rwanda, we have different expertise in those in many domains in that one. So what we try to do is to work, or what we have already started, is to work on the key research and policy debates regarding education, health, urban sustainability in Kigali and Huye city, research and capacity strengthening activity to fill the existing knowledge gaps. But we also have already produced some research outputs, like clearly make the city profile of those two cities. We are also planning to collect data and analyze data at the neighborhood level. Why is that? Because the data existing now from the National Institute of Statistics are coming, but are not going below the district level, which is after the province. We have the country, the provinces, and then the district, which still is a big, which is not allowing to get more details on, let's say, the use of the facilities in terms of health and education. So the challenge
here, I think that's the end of your minutes. Do you want to just say a final word to sum up? I mean, I think that was a really great point about neighborhoods and measurement, and it complemented the mayor's talk very well. Do you just want a final sentence before we move on to the final city?
Yes, the good thing, or the advantage, I will just say one thing on the advantages of the data to be collected by SHLC in our next phase, which is RP3, is to collect data at the neighborhood level. We have already a very detailed questionnaire, and this will allow now the cities to really show the potentiality, what they can do in terms of making available the facilities in health and also in education.
I think that's a wonderful point. Yeah, that's a wonderful point. Thank you so much, Pierre and Mayor. And it links back to the IIEP talk and Hosia Kim's talk about bottom-up, grassroots, co-created, co-designed approaches I think that was a really lovely. I'm sorry, I think we failed to share your presentation, but you were absolutely engaging just listening to you speak. So it is with great pleasure that we move to our final city of the day. I apologize that this is a whirlwind global tour and that everybody has much more to say. So please pose your questions for each presenter in the Q&A box. We will have time to ask more, but we have to move now to the mayor of Huejotzingo in Mexico. We have very lucky to have a presentation from their mayor, Angelica Alvarado Juarez, who has a translator, I believe. So I will hand over for a final presentation, and then we will open for questions and answers. So please hang on and pose your questions in the Q&A box. Thank you. Welcome.
Gracias, Catherine. ¿Cómo están todos? Muy buenas tardes a todos por allá y buenos días aquí en México.
Thank you, Catherine. How is everybody? I wish everybody's having a good day, and thank you again.
Bueno, en el caso de México voy a hablar acerca de cómo se ha dado la planeación educativa, así como el impacto que ha tenido las ciudades del aprendizaje en este concepto que nosotros como ciudades y municipios hemos adoptado.
Regarding Mexico, I'm going to talk about how is the education planning and what is the impact of learning cities.
Por favor, la siguiente slide.
Please, next slide.
En México, la planeación, el seguimiento y la evaluación de la educación han sido completamente responsabilidad del gobierno federal y de los gobiernos estatales. En ese sentido, las ciudades y los municipios nos hemos quedado de manera limitada con una participación dentro del proceso de planeación y transformación educativa, así como actores de la sociedad civil y la iniciativa privada.
In Mexico, planning, following up, and evaluating education has been the absolute responsibility of federal, states, and governments, and in this sense, municipalities have been limited in regards to these processes.
De hecho, quiero comentar que el concepto de ciudad del aprendizaje es un concepto o es un modelo que tiene muy pocos años, donde nosotros como municipios y ciudades lo hemos adoptado. Y un claro ejemplo está en que en la reforma educativa de hace un año, del 2019, donde el modelo de la nueva escuela mexicana no se contemplan a las ciudades o a los municipios dentro del proceso y diseño de los mecanismos de coordinación y participación con los actores locales.
Example of that is that of the education reform from 2019 and the new Mexican school model, not contemplating the cities as part of the design process and not establishing, coordinating, and participating mechanisms for the local actors. Next slide, thank you.
En los últimos años, los municipios que integramos la red de ciudades del aprendizaje de Unesco, hemos impulsado la construcción de planes estratégicos para brindar oportunidades en el aprendizaje no formal, atendiendo principalmente la dimensión social de la educación y sobre todo que no podemos dejar de decir que la educación formal y no formal estén articulados, sino que nosotros como ciudades hemos visto limitada nuestra intervención solamente a un tema de construcción de aulas, equipamiento, pero no así en el tema de la construcción de los programas educativos en pro del desarrollo de nuestro territorio.
In the past years, we, the municipality members of UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities, have been driving the making of strategic action plans to provide non-formal learning opportunities for everyone, looking mainly after education's social dimension. Of course, this does not mean the spontaneous articulation of formal and non-formal education systems. Cities normally take part of the economic dimension planning of the education. That means building classrooms, equipment, maintenance, etc., but not the curricular programs designed that link education to community development.
Next, please.
Next, please. Thank you.
En México, las ciudades del aprendizaje han identificado este problema y han tomado la iniciativa para articular esfuerzos dentro del sistema de educación formal con sistemas no formales e informales de educación, al involucrar a cada una de las partes interesadas de la ciudad en la construcción de planes integrales, principalmente a las autoridades responsables de la educación. A través de esto es posible, 1, reducir esfuerzos dispersos, 2, construir una visión de ciudad en la que todos los sectores trabajen, sociedad civil, academia, responder efectivamente a las necesidades de aprendizaje de niñas, niños, jóvenes y adultos, y 4, homologar los criterios de evaluación de avances.
Learning cities in Mexico have identified this problem and have taken the initiative to articulate formal education systems effort to that being made by the non-formal and informal education systems, by involving each one of the city's stakeholders in the making of comprehensive plans, mainly the authorities responsible of education. By these means, it is possible to, first, reduce scattered efforts, secondly, build the city's vision where all sectors work, effectively respond to the learning needs of children, young people, and adults, finally, to homologate the evaluation criteria of progress.
La siguiente, por favor.
Next, please.
En el caso del municipio de Huejotzingo, adoptamos las características fundamentales de ciudades del aprendizaje, donde hemos adoptado 60 indicadores como base para el diagnóstico y el plan de acción de nuestra ciudad. Esto sumado a un comité y a través de la dirección de planeación que pertenece al ayuntamiento, establecimos un programa de monitoreo y evaluación del trabajo realizado como ciudad del aprendizaje.
In the case of Huejotzingo municipality, we embrace the fundamental characteristics of learning cities. 60 indicators were the base of our city's diagnose and action plan. Through both Cities Committee and Planning Office, we established a program for monitoring and evaluating the work being done as a learning city.
En este sentido, ha sido muy importante la participación del comité y sobre todo de sumar a este modelo de ciudad del aprendizaje la participación de diferentes actores, como ya lo comentaron los otros 2 alcaldes, donde no solamente el crear relaciones con diferentes actores de la sociedad contribuye justamente a construir este modelo de ciudad del aprendizaje, sino también el que incluyamos la participación ciudadana, considero que es un punto clave para el éxito dentro de la planeación de ciudades del aprendizaje.
Moreover, and as the other panelists told already, it is really important to coordinate the collaboration of all the actors to make these efforts a reality.
Next, por favor. Los retos que actualmente tenemos como país y creo que todos como ciudades ante la contingencia de salud que estamos viviendo ante el COVID-19, sabemos que ha dejado en descubierto ciertas brechas digitales y los retos que tenemos como autoridades. En ese sentido, en el caso de nuestro país, en el caso de México, es importante replantear la forma en la que nosotros como municipios y ciudades, desde lo local, podemos contribuir en la educación no solamente de nuestros niños y jóvenes, sino también de nuestros docentes y otros actores. En ese sentido, quiero comentar, exacto, en esa slide, que en el caso de nosotros, la anterior, por favor. En el caso de Huejotzingo, hemos impulsado un programa de nuevas competencias para nuestros docentes, a través de un curso de actualización de técnicas pedagógicas para la enseñanza de inglés y uso de plataformas digitales que permitan contribuir al desarrollo no solamente de ellos como docentes, sino también de nuestros alumnos.
The challenges we have faced as a country, as well as all the other countries around the world, we have made visible all the technology shortages. Moreover, and in the face of this COVID pandemic, Huejotzingo government has actively participated in the development of new competencies of elementary education teachers through a refresher course of pedagogical technologies for teaching English, and the use of digital platforms in addition to delivering computer equipment to teachers and students.
Next slide, please. Los desafíos que enfrentamos como municipios y ciudades para monitorear y evaluar los avances como ciudad del aprendizaje principalmente son la falta de cultura de evaluación y por lo tanto de personal capacitado para realizar esta tarea. 2, recursos financieros y materiales limitados actualmente, insisto, por la situación generada por el COVID-19 y gran parte de los recursos han sido redirigidos a programas de asistencia social. 3, el reconocimiento de todos los actores de la importancia de mantener el monitoreo permanente, así como la creación de alianzas con instituciones educativas que ayuden a validar la información generada. 4, asociar los indicadores a cuestiones tangibles para las personas y la comunidad. 5, la difusión de los resultados de evaluación, así como la situación de un avance que no progrese. Y por último, y más importante, es la continuidad de la evaluación y el monitoreo sin importar el cambio de gobierno, que ese es un reto que tenemos todas las ciudades, o por lo menos aquí en México, donde el limitado tiempo de gestión de un gobierno pues no permite a veces la continuidad de proyectos que trasciendan, ¿no?, más allá de un gobierno, y por eso es que insisto que la participación de los ciudadanos es lo más importante.
The challenges we face as municipalities and cities to supervise and evaluate the improvements as a learning city are a lack of evaluation culture and thus qualified personnel to conduct this task. Second, limited financial and material resources due to the current situation caused by COVID-19. A large part of all the resources has been redirected to social assistance programs. The recognition of all the important actors in maintaining a permanent monitoring, as well as the creation of alliances with educational institutions that validate the information generated. Associating indicators with tangible issues for people and the community. Dissemination of the evaluation results, even in situations of no progress. And the main point of the continuity of evaluation and supervision regardless of the change of government. This is a challenge that all the cities have. Limited government time lapses limits the transcendence of the projects, and that's why I urge the collaboration of all the city actors to make these projects possible.
Can I jump in there? That was the 10 minutes. So if the mayor wouldn't mind just summing up, that would be wonderful.
Is the last slide. I'm going quickly.
Okay. Excellent timing, thank you.
En México está creciendo cada vez más el interés por este concepto de ciudades del aprendizaje. Un claro ejemplo es la nueva ley de educación en el estado de Puebla, del cual mi ciudad pertenece, y para ello pues seguiremos sumando a través de nosotros como iniciativas y como ciudad dentro de este modelo, y que hemos repetido los anteriores alcaldes, que es la participación entre los diferentes sectores, que eso es punto clave, el generar la participación ciudadana para darle una continuidad dentro de los programas, y que estamos convencidos de que la creación de estos clústeres de planeación para el desarrollo de las capacidades de las ciudades es parte fundamental para el impulso y el desarrollo de la educación en los diferentes países.
Today, in countries like Mexico, interest for learning cities concept is growing. This has allowed the creation of regulatory instruments that recognize these concepts as the most relevant measure to guarantee the universal right to education. Example of these is the new education law in Puebla State. Moreover, these regulations acknowledge the relevance of planning and systematic evaluation of formal and non-formal education programs. I'm convinced that these conditions and initiatives like the creation of clusters dedicated to the development of capacities for education planning in cities are fundamental to generate a culture of evaluation, monitoring of education in developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that was really good timekeeping too. Just a minute or so over. So thank you so much for making my life easy. I know we just have had so much to talk about, so we are, and also we started late because of such a popular crowd. So we're going to move to the questions and answers now. And as you can see, we are running late, but we'll have the Q&A right up until the end of 2:30, and then we'll have Mike wrap up just after the finishing time. So if you could hang in there. Our very first question is posed to Candy at IIEP. And the question is, Candy, how reliable do you think the results are of your study, particularly considering the qualitative approaches, and what are the instruments or modes utilized to get the response? I presume that might be the responses in terms of primary data collection, but also in terms of responses to your findings. So Candy,
Yes.
what can you say about the reliability and your measures and approaches? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Catherine, and thank you for the questions. Indeed, I've noted this question, and I think there's maybe another one also later. Yes, for the purpose of this research is not to draw comparisons between cities, and as you know, there are actually so many cities either in France or all over the world, but it's really to learn from kind of successful experiences. That's why we developed this kind of sample data, a sample group with a kind of selection criteria. And identifying with it cities with kind of significant or dynamism also in education. So the purpose is not to generalize data, and as you know, that's always somehow the main point of discussion with qualitative research. But through this research, it's really to learn from these experiences and to highlight, to put light on this experience of cities in planning for education, which is not very well known actually in the research. And as I said, there's a research gap. So how we collected data, we developed a quite comprehensive analytical framework, and based on that, we developed very thorough interview guides. And then there is also a system of data analysis and coding and so, but based on that, so we prepared the city case studies, and which are kind of city diagnosis actually. And we put specific attention in the city case studies on the views and the opinions of these local level actors that we interviewed.
That's a great answer, Candy. I was just going to open it up to anybody else, because I think you're not the only one who used qualitative as part of your approach. So is it okay if nobody else wants to jump in, then we'll continue with you. But I thought one of the other presenters who use qualitative as part of their approach might want to unmute and talk about how that integrates into a larger evidence base. No one. Okay, I'll jump in and then I'll let you say a little bit more. I always use mixed methods. I don't have any of my work which isn't. I think you're absolutely right that sometimes the important point is to have a generalizable to a larger population finding, but sometimes, like you say, it's about the lived personal experience of people. And for me, the research only becomes more powerful when we're able to weave these different narratives together, the statistical narratives with the actual boots on the ground lived experience of what we're talking about. And I really liked, Candy, that you had a planned approach to evaluation right at the start of the planning cycle. That jumped out to me at your work. Would you like to say anything else to follow up on that before we move to the next question?
No, not necessarily to follow up on that, Nanya. Then of course, we complete also our research with kind of quantitative data, but based analyzing, the city's figures and so on. So, but that it's somehow a mixed approach. And then in parallel, we are conducting this international quantitative survey with UIL and the Learning Cities on EPM to have this both kind of approach also to approach educational planning in cities.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you. So the second question will aim towards Hoseok Kim from the Republic of Korea. What are the recommendations you would give to cities recently embracing the lifelong learning approach in terms of building monitoring and evaluation indicators? Because it's clear that your city is quite far down the line in terms of learning city development evaluation, Hoseok. So what advice would you have for emerging learning cities? If you can unmute yourself. Hoseok.
Right. As the previous speaker said, monitoring and evaluation of a city cannot be compared to that of other cities.
Good point. Very good point. So do you have any advice?
Now his answers are interpreted consecutively. What really matters is to find out the growth and changes in the citizens and the city itself in analyzing how the lifelong learning or learning itself impacted the change. In your evaluation mechanism, sustainability will be key because you want to have a time series analysis. You want to see the change of the city over time. So I hope when you are establishing your own indicators, you could come up with a combination of both quantitative and qualitative approaches. And I believe the qualitative aspect can be a key point, a key contributor to the critical changes of the city. To stress the point once again, please use indicators and evaluation mechanism to check the progress and change of your own city.
I think that's a wonderful answer, and I'm absolutely thrilled to hear time series analysis mentioned in such a meaningful way in terms of tracking urban change over time. So thank you very much for that wonderful answer. And I think we'll direct our third question to the city of Huye in Rwanda. So we've got one question for each city, then we'll turn to Mike Osborn for some words, but we will then continue with a second round of questions. So please don't go away. The question for the city of Rwanda, I don't know if the mayor or Dr. Clavier wants to respond, but is media information literacy considered, oh sorry, that's the second question for Hoseok. Sorry, let me start again. How does the creation of planning and monitoring indicators support the effectiveness of the education policies, and how do you engage local actors like the University of Rwanda? So that's a two-part question about planning and monitoring indicators. How do they sort of interact with the effectiveness of education policy, and also how do you recruit local actors to this cause?
Thank you very much, Catherine, and for the questions. As I mentioned in my presentation, maybe I didn't explain it more. In the framework of the planning process, from the global perspective, you know the Sustainable Development Goals. We have a long-term vision of the country, which is the Vision 2050. And for the purpose of the implementation of the vision, the country has come up with the National Strategic Transformation Strategy, which is a 7 years program, which has highlighted a target to achieve for each of the 7 years. Normally, when we plan, as I mentioned, for the district, normally we plan for an annual basis. We have a district development strategy for the aligned to the 7 years program of the country. In that District 7 development strategy, we have all the target for each year. And when we develop the performance contract of each of the district, we consider the aspect of education in the planning process, and the targets are set in consultation with the Ministry of Education and all the stakeholders in education. And for the purpose of the monitoring and evaluation, there are two aspects. There are those conducted by the district and the district staff. When it comes for the when we want to develop a policy or a projects, we normally involve the University of Rwanda. As I mentioned, the city, we have the largest campus in the city, and we have come up even on the district administrative structure, came up what we call a city advisory committee. So in the city advisory committee, we are planning to include some of the lecturers at the university. So to be part of I would say it's an advisory board of the district, so they can be part of the planning also and part of the evaluation process of the target as education is concerned. Maybe, I don't know, Dr. Josephine can come in. I know they have other programs with the other cities, but for the specific case of Huye, there's the new thing that we are planning to start with this year, the city advisory committee. So then we have the aspect of the infrastructure, educations. Then we interest the very specialists in those areas, so to be part of the city advisory committee. So it's above, they are not going to replace the district's council as mentioned, but specifically they'll be advising the city in the line or the vision of the city, which is to become like an engine of human development capital of the country. Thank you, Catherine.
I think that's a wonderful answer, Mayor. Thank you so much. And you addressed so very many levels, from sustainable development goals to national goals to city goals to sitting on advisory boards for higher education institution and other educational institutional goals, right down to the neighborhood learner needs. That's a wonderful. And very briefly, do your academic colleagues, either Josephine or Pierre, want to jump in and add anything to that before we move on to our questions for Mexico, for the mayor there?
Perhaps I could just come in really quickly, because I understand that Pierre is not on board.
Yes.
So Josephine Malonza, I'm a lecturer at the University of Rwanda and part of the Sustainable, Healthy and Learning Cities that my colleague Pierre Clabert introduced. So I think I totally agree with what the mayor is saying. And in addition to the district or the cities wanting to connect with the universities have also been specifically encouraged to strengthen the linkages between the universities and the cities. So the university does not look at us as academic staff, as people that are just there to research and teach, but community engagement has been added as a pillar of our performance in the university. So when I report the courses that I teach and the research that I do, I'm also asked to report on community engagement. So I see this as a two-way friendship. The cities are reaching out to the university is also reaching out to the cities. But I must admit that this is a learning curve. Our cities are still new. I mean, Huye was given a city status not long ago, 3 years ago. And so there's still a lot of learning to do. And the collaboration that the mayor has expressed is the same that we extend at the university. And so through amazing projects like the SHLC, where we are going all the way to the grassroots, we are actually trying to be a nexus between top-down planning and bottom-up planning, in trying to voice out all these innovations that come from both trying to localize SDGs, but as well as the grassroots innovations that have been discussed by all the presenters today, and how that feeds back into the global frame. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Josephine. That was a wonderful answer. Really tied all the stakeholder threads together. So thank you very much. We'll have one question aimed for Mayor Juarez, and then we'll let Mike Osborn say some words to bring the story together, but we won't end there. So because we have one more round of questions for each of you. So if you could hang on. But the final first round of city questions for Huejotzingo Mayor Juarez, what have been the challenges in building meaningful indicators for the city? And what are the indicators used in the city to keep track of the development of the learning city? If you need to, we could copy these for your translator, but it's what are the challenges in building meaningful indicators, and what are the indicators that you're using to keep track of your city's development? Mayor Juarez.
Yes, I'm gonna translate it. ¿Cuáles han sido los retos para construir indicadores significativos y cuáles son los indicadores utilizados para seguir el desarrollo en su ciudad, alcaldesa?
Okay. Bueno, dentro de los retos que tenemos, y como lo mencioné, es que tenemos una participación limitada como ciudades en la construcción de políticas públicas en cuestiones de educación. Generalmente se nos limita a las ciudades en el tema solamente de construcción, equipamiento, y de alguna manera a nosotros como municipios nos dejan relegados en esa planeación, ya que solamente es competencia actualmente del gobierno federal y del gobierno estatal.
Yeah, as I said before, part of the challenges that we're facing is that we have a limited participation as citizens in building these public policies. We are limited to equipment and maintenance, and this is due to the main role the government has in creating all the planning processes along with the federal government and the local ones.
Ok, pero me falta. ¿Y cuáles son, y en el caso de, o sea, cuáles son nuestras oportunidades de incidir en el desarrollo de indicadores? Es la buena noticia en que a través de este modelo de ciudades del aprendizaje, nosotros podemos construir un rol mucho más activo y que en el municipio de Huejotzingo ya lo estamos haciendo, ¿no? En el caso de la construcción de indicadores que nos permitan seguir construyendo en el tema de aprendizaje no formal, insisto, ¿no? Dentro del modelo es incluir a nuevos actores de la sociedad civil, de empresas y de otros sectores, además del académico, para que participen dentro del desarrollo educativo del municipio. Dos, dentro de los indicadores y dentro del modelo es importante tomar un rol mucho más activo, como lo mencioné, para la construcción justamente y seguimiento de la planeación dentro de una educación no formal. Y tres, la participación ciudadana es fundamental como un eje transversal justamente para la construcción de políticas públicas enfocadas al aprendizaje y sobre todo al conocimiento a lo largo de la vida.
Yes.
Gabriel,
yes. Our challenges, which are the opportunities for us to create these indicators are the following. We can create a much bigger role and more active, and we are doing that already, to formalize the non-formal learning. We are including actors from the society and enterprises and the academical realm to pull them in the participation for the development of the educative development. We would like to have a much bigger development, much more active in the enhancement of the non-formal education. And therefore, collaboration is really important to create these public policies to ensure the lifelong learning of the citizens.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great answer. I really liked the mayor's emphasis on articulating less formal types of learning and linking it to community development. So I think that is an answer that does contribute to both evaluation and measurement. So now we've completed our first round of questions, we're going to hand over to Professor Mike Osborn, who is the Director of Research, School of Education, University of Glasgow, but also the Deputy or Director, of Pascal International Observatory, who's going to do some tying the threads together of all the presentations we've heard today. And then if you have time, we will do a second round of questions. Mike?
Thank you very much, Catherine. I've been listening with fascination to the presentations today, and congratulations to everyone for staying with us for so long. It's very demanding doing these presentations, and you've all done an excellent job. From listening to what has been said, I will just try and summarize some key issues which seem to have emerged. From IEP in Paris, we heard an excellent presentation from Candy about systematic procedures for planning at urban level, which I think many of us can learn from. In Goyang, we saw, and we probably didn't have enough time, some excellent work on indicator development. And I'll come back to that a little later. From Huye, from both the mayor, who gave us some very interesting information about planning frameworks and strategic vision for a developing city, and from Pierre Claver, we heard about what is a very major project, which not only is working in Rwanda, but a number of other countries around the world, and I put up a link to it, the Center for Sustainable Healthy Learning Cities, which I am part of. But I think one of the important things that came out of that presentation was the focus on neighborhood. And this is something that's come up in other webinars around learning cities, that the reality is that people live at neighborhood level. And so one doesn't simply explore cities or towns as one homogeneous area, but there are many differences at neighborhood level, and we need to explore at that level. Pierre's presentation will be made available to you, and I'm sorry that you couldn't see it today. From Mexico, from Huejotzingo, it was very important that there was a focus there in that presentation on the non-formal sector. Again, there was a discussion of indicators, and that seems to have been a theme which has come through very strongly today. So it may be that we ought to be looking once again at the range of indicators that we have available for monitoring the progress of cities in relation to learning city development. I should remind you, of course, that UNESCO, UIL, does have a framework of the key features of learning cities, and I was part of the expert group that started that work way back in 2012. And to a certain extent, these indicators have been the framework for a lot of learning city development within UNESCO's global network of learning cities. One of the things, though, we might want to look at in more depth is ways in which we can operationalize those indicators, and some of the work that Catherine has done herself together with me and other colleagues at UBDC in Glasgow is look at the literature that relates to the measurement tools and what the most valid and reliable indicators might be. And this, I'm sure, is something that we can come back to again. Another issue that came up, which I think is very important, is we should do this over a period of time. Things change. So we need relatively simple instruments that are not costly, that we can use systematically across time to show how progress has been made. So that's a very quick summary of some of the key issues that have come up. We will, of course, be constructing collaboratively with UIL a summary of everything that happened today. We will provide all of the PowerPoints. And as Catherine says, there's going to be a little bit of time for more questions. One final thing to remind you of, that this is not the last of our collaborative seminars. On the 16th of September, we're having a little break for the northern summer. If a northern summer ever comes here in Scotland, we might have a break too. And the next of those webinars is on the 16th of September, the challenge of developing the role of the technical, vocational education and training sector, business learning and entrepreneurship in lifelong learning. And if your friends want to come into the webinar, please remind them to come early. There are over 500 people here in this webinar, and there's probably another 500 people who didn't come in because they arrived a bit too late. Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was beautifully done and practically. So just before we move to the next round of questions, first I would like to thank all the mayors for getting up early in some places like Mexico and staying up late in other places like Korea. So to all the mayors, the speakers, the panelists, before I forget, the organizers, we've had a bumper crop. I think this has to be one of the most well-attended webinars that I think Unesco or Pascal has ever hosted. So hopefully we can do more on this topic and maybe have fewer speakers speaking for a longer time, because I think it was potentially a bit much and ambitious to try and accomplish everything we did today. So we appreciate if you can't stay with us any longer, but if you can stay with us longer, we would like to pose one final round of questions for each of the speakers, just to really make sure that we're making this space the dialogical knowledge exchange sharing space that we want it to be. So we couldn't have done it without you, our audience, and your questions so eloquently posed, with all of the chat going on in the chat box. It's been lovely to see people from all over the world. It's been a difficult job moderating because there's just been too much to discuss, but I love thinking about ways that we could work across sectors to better harness and capture what we're already doing so well. So with that final thank you to everybody, I would like to do our final round of questions, starting with a question for IIEP, that is Candy and Chloe's team, which is how to engage local actors in the different stages of planning, and what are or were the challenges to doing that?
Yes, thank you, Catherine. Well, actually, a key condition is consultation, but it's true that it's always difficult and maybe also tricky because, yes, it takes time, and these cities usually, they work in a very very quick changing context, and for the cities we studied, it's always okay going in a rush and or emergency situations to implement new policies or so. So very often they develop their new education strategy very quickly without the time to properly consult. But so developing efficient consultation mechanisms at the different levels with the parents, and it may be tricky also for the parents because in some cases there are no PTAs or parent associations, so it may be also difficult to reach the parents who may feel not comfortable if they come from disadvantaged families. They might not feel comfortable with the education issues, I would say, but still, so developing this kind of mechanisms of consultation on the ground with the relay of information with then I would say the top management of the city, and yes, I mean taking into account this risk of okay, taking time, but also the benefits that comes from the processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very thorough and to the point. And I think you have a really great example of best practice there of really involving stakeholder voices at all stages of the process. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. So the next and final question for the Republic of Korea for Goyang municipality is media information literacy considered as a prerequisite for the future of lifelong learning cities? If not, what are the prerequisites for citizens participating in co-creation teams? I think that's a really great question. Let me know if you need it in the chat box. Hosiak Kim, Mayor of Goyang City.
Okay. When it comes to media literacy, I think a key aspect is to restore relationships. Now we have a huge group of information, media information, and they were actually created from a lot of different relationships. And a key aspect that should be taught in media literacy education is that communication always entails distortion and misunderstanding. So to stress once again, major relationship creating activities are now taking place in the media. So media literacy is a key area in lifelong learning. And let me also talk about the co-creation team. First of all, it's important for the co-creation team members to recognize themselves as key actors of the implementation of the education policy. So in other words, they should think of themselves as the owners of the establishment of educational planning. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for that wonderful answer, Hosiak Kim and the mayor of Goyang Municipality. A wonderful answer, a quite empowering message there about empowering people to feel creators or active citizens in the creation of learning cities. And now we move on to one final question for Huye in Rwanda and a final question for Mexico, and that will be a wrap up. So for Huye City in Rwanda, the question is, what are the ways in which we can share our best practices across different cities? And I think this is a great question for you because Huye and Kigali have had this symbiotic, I think, learning city journey. So if you could say a little bit more about sharing best practices between and across different cities within the nation or outside the nation, that would be great.
Thank you very much. This is a very good question, and I was looking forward also to someone also to respond on this. But to me, what I think it's this way of creating such a kind of networks where city can meet and interact, depending on the either being locally or at global level. At a local level, we have now the capital city and the 6 secondary cities. There are sessions now. Most of the time we meet twice a year to share the best the experiences, but we haven't come with such what I call like a network, which is going to be maybe like a framework that is structured. But I like these learning city networks. Maybe we can do it at the regional level. Then it can be extended to far from the neighboring countries, but I like this idea of creating a network of learning cities. And if possible, with this now digital world, it doesn't mean necessarily that to meet physically. Maybe that we can create maybe a website or like a network where we can post or share our best experience in our cities or challenges. For example, in the country, like for the case of we are in process of reviewing our master plan. We are learning from the Kigali city. I quite often exchange with the Lord Mayor of the capital city, but it's in an informal way, but we need to create such a networks where we can meet and share the experience without necessarily being an informal way. At least we share the common vision of our cities. So it's better to be united and get a forum to share those experiences without necessarily waiting such a webinar conferences. Maybe if you have something to share with the other cities, we just upload it, and with this digital world, it's easier to share experience without limitation, any limitation. Thank you very much.
Mayor Anjay, I feel like I should pay you or something, or send you a gift or a bottle of wine for showing exactly what we were hoping to do here today, and for pointing out that these spaces are the exact spaces where we can share the best practices of our cities and learn from each other, and also for pointing out the importance of learning city networks for doing that. So you really brought it full circle to the whole aim of today, and I would love to open it up to your team, and I might be able to, but we have one final question that we need to pose to the Mayor Juarez at the city of Huejotzingo in Mexico, where we want to know from the mayor, how do you think we should communicate the government's objectives and goals to the public, and how can we ensure the participation of citizens in the long run? So we can type this in the chat box to your translator, but how do you communicate the government's objectives and goals to the public? Let's say the Learning Cities agenda. How do you communicate to that public and ensure the participation of citizens in the long run? Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to translate it. Queremos saber cómo crees que debamos comunicar los objetivos del gobierno al público y cómo crees que se puedan asegurar la participación de los ciudadanos a la larga.
Algo que hemos estado haciendo en el municipio para comunicarle a la gente no solamente los objetivos y en general las actividades del gobierno, es a través de redes sociales, pero sobre todo que también nos ha ayudado a garantizar la participación de los ciudadanos, es haciendo comités de vecinos, es decir, por diferentes colonias o sectores pequeños o comunidades del municipio, hemos invitado a que los vecinos se organicen y no solamente comunicamos temas que tienen que ver con actividades del municipio, sino también inclusive temas de seguridad, ¿no? Temas de educación. Eso nos ha ayudado mucho a hacer la difusión y la comunicación de los objetivos que tenemos como gobierno. Y en el caso de ciudades del aprendizaje, la instalación del comité nos ayudó mucho a sumar gente de la iniciativa privada, de las empresas que están instaladas en el municipio. En el caso de Huejotzingo hay 2,400 empresas, así como a sumar también a los sectores educativos de la sociedad civil que participan con nosotros de manera constante. Hemos estado haciendo reuniones casi cada mes, o por lo menos cada 2 meses, donde vamos platicando los avances que tenemos, pero sobre todo, insisto, el tema de ciudad del aprendizaje y con los docentes, hemos estado haciendo esas reuniones de manera permanente para que permee ellos como docentes al interior de sus escuelas y con los alumnos.
Yeah, something that we have been doing in the municipality of Huejotzingo to communicate to the people the objectives is mainly through social networks. But something that has helped us to guarantee the participation of the committees has been the alliances of neighbors in some sort of committee arrangement. We can organize and communicate topics related to the neighborhood itself, but we also can communicate the message about security and other issues. About learning, these had helped us to some of the initiative and private initiative. Around 2,400 companies have summed our movement. And we have also summed up the people from the educative sectors that are helping us constantly. And we are having meetings once a month or even twice a month where we can share information regarding education. We can also communicate this to the teachers. And in this way, we can guarantee that the information runs through all the people in the institutes, the educative institutes, and the students.
Y otra cosa muy importante es que hemos instalado el Consejo de Niñas, Niños y Jóvenes en el municipio. Entonces, junto con el Comité de Ciudades del Aprendizaje y el Comité de Niñas y Jóvenes, esto nos ha ayudado, o por lo menos nos va a ayudar a que el proyecto de Ciudades del Aprendizaje y este tipo de programas para darle seguimiento a la planeación y a los objetivos de la Agenda 2030 ayuda a trascender más allá de nuestra administración municipal.
And some other thing that is really important is that we have installed the Children, Youth, and Adults Council, and along with the Committee of Learning and all the other stakeholders are helping us guarantee that the projects regarding education and the planning of these projects and along with the objectives of the 2030 agenda, we can assure that they transcend the objectives of the municipality and overrun the government time lapses.
I think that's all the time we have for, but I think that was a really thorough answer. We all need to think about global engagement and the sustainability of learning city approaches if we really want to embed them within urban approaches longer term. So without further ado, I think I will pass over for the very final concluding remarks of Professor Mike Osborn, and I'll just give you my endless thanks again to the panelists, the presenters, particularly the mayors, but also you, the audience, for bearing with us, which has been a really diverse and amazing discussion. So Mike, could you conclude the webinar for us, please?
Thank you, Catherine. I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. We've already gone way over our time allocation, and thank you so many of you for bearing with us. We started with over 500 people. I can see that we all still have 481 of you online, so it must have been interesting today. Let me thank everyone who's been involved, not least of all our colleagues at UIL. You cannot imagine how much goes on behind the scenes in organizing these events. And thank you to Catherine as well for chairing and moderating the event. We know it's difficult, stressful at times, multitasking, but we know that women are much better than men at multitasking. So, and she's shown that she is very able in doing that today. So, as I said before, this is one of a series. The next is on the 16th of September. We'll be looking at ways in which we can perhaps let more people in next time, given the demands on the webinar today. And as I also said before, you will be able to get the PowerPoints for all of these presentations, and we also will be creating a summary of all the presentations in text form and some recommendations perhaps from what has happened today for this area of planning, evaluation, measurement, and the development of indicators, which I think is extremely important in relation to learning city development, and in a sense, a core of what we should do to establish whether all this effort that we put in is leading to impact and change. So thank you once again from the Pascal Observatory, and I also thank you on behalf of my very good friends at the UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning in Hamburg, and we will see you all again on the 16th of September. So bye for now.